Hi, everybody. Welcome to tonight's mindfulness and resilience practices class. You're here with Frank and Vivian. I happen to be Frank. And
I'm Vivian.
so, welcome to the class. I'm going to hand it over to Vivian, who will lead us in tonight's topic and practice. Take it away, Vivian.
Thank you, Frank. Welcome everyone. It's nice to be back. We're continuing the topic of accessing rest, and the focus will be about finding the calm. So I thought we would revisit this as an overview of the types of rest that there are, and realizing that in all of these, there's the active state and then there's the restful state. So rest becomes a very relative thing. It always is a relative thing, but sometimes we don't necessarily allow it to have its full cycle when it needs to be here. And we're still focusing on the mental, emotional, and the sensory. And so, as we kind of embrace the idea that rest is a relative state, relative to active, we know that it's part of a cycle, that it has its place, that its purpose and the need for it is to provide for restoration and down regulation, and that it's essential, even though sometimes we don't prioritize it. At some point, the mind and or the body will force the system into rest because it can't move any further. Now, we don't want to get to that point where we're kind of pushing our body to the point where it collapses into rest. We want it so that we bring it as much as possible into our activities so that we can really be intentional and responsive to whatever the needs in the moment happen to be. So, Frank, did you have any thoughts on these elements of rest being relative, cyclical, restorative, and essential?
No, I always say no
You
and then
do
I
always say
say
no.
something. You figure one day I'll learn how to respond properly. Yes, I think what you were just saying about it being essential, like if we don't do it on purpose and we just do it when we have to, there are dangers in that. Shumi isn't resting right now. So part of rest, especially in American culture, is like it's the last thing you do, and you only do it because you have to. And the sleep research suggests that if you do it on purpose, you actually accomplish more because you're in top condition instead of just dragging along thinking you're doing, well, you really are doing the best you can, but you could be doing better.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. And you're more than welcome to always say yes in response when I say, do you have anything to share on that? You taught me yes and.
You'd think I'd know better, especially all the years I've gone, oh, I just said no and I'm going to say something.
Uh,
Apparently, I still have some blind spots.
yes and. So what we're going to work with is a practice that is kind of an amalgam of different practices. Um, and what I want to speak to is these four intentionalities or intentional responses. So the first one is to relax your attention. Oftentimes, when we're doing a meditation, we have a focal point. Here, we really just want to let go of all focal points and just allow ourselves to experience whatever happens to be arising in this moment. And so we're going to approach this with a sense of release. And the way I wanted you to think about release is in contrast to, let's say you're gripping something, you're even like a pen or something, you're holding a pen, just letting it go, letting it settle. Um, the next piece is exhale all striving, and that is to use the exhaling breath to invite relaxation into the body, to allow for this emptying to happen. Consider the exhalation as the expelling and the emptying of the stale air. So you can do it in very intentional, deep exhalations that allow you to just get out as much of the stale air as you can. And the next piece of it is to sense into the silence. So in rest, hopefully, even though there might still be activity happening, you aren't focused on any of it. It all becomes a bit of a hazy experience that you kind of allow to fall into the background and allow the sense of um, neutrality to move over everything that you're experiencing through your senses, whether it's physical sensations or through visual or hearing, whether it's shumi barking or whatever arises, just allowing it as it rises to your awareness. It's going to come up. Things are going to come up. Either a thought is going to come up, a memory, an emotion. Say, oh, yes, you're here. Thank you. And see if you can set it into the background, imagining your mind as though you're setting a stage and you want it to be one of those very blank slate stages. So everything ends up being in the background and nothing in the foreground, or as little as possible, we'll say, in the foreground. Finally, is to tune in to awareness. So the other way we can connect with rest is there is a witnessing happening, and this one might be a little more inaccessible to connect with, but when you're giving your attention to your breath or whatever it is, and here we're going to just open ourselves to open awareness, but set all of that into the background and see what it's like to have this kind of neutral, hazy perspective on anything that's arising. What would it be like to note who's doing that? What is the witness who's taking part in this that you're directing? And so you're kind of turning the visual and the perspective to note who's resting, right? This one is a little more tricky. Sometimes I would say also, like I said, inaccessible, but it's still there. And we can always note that this vast awareness, whether we're tapping into it or we're not, it's always there. It's just a matter of, have we opened the door for it, or are we really caught up in our day-to-day activities that it's not allowing us, for whatever, there's so much layers of distraction that it's not allowing us to open up to that level of awareness and vastness, unless we're focused on the breathing or the physical sensations or the ambient sounds, whatever we choose to be our mindfulness anchor. So with these, you can tell that they also show up as the acronym for rest, as relax, exhale, sense and tune, and release, empty, surrender, and trust. And the trust comes in terms of allowing that witness to be here, like trusting that that perceptually they've got it right. And I want to remind you, as we do this practice, before we jump into the how to practice, from the perspective of mindfulness, there is no wrong thought or wrong emotion or wrong bodily sensation. There are things that we prefer. There are things that are more pleasant in our perception than others. Um, but there is no wrong thought. There's no moralizing or judgment happening. Um, that's something that we layer on. So as much as possible as we do this practice, if you see yourself judging yourself or judging me or judging the technique or whatever is arising, where you're kind of see if you can hold that with some neutrality, as much realizing that that's normal. These things come up. Yeah. So with that, let's kind of talk about how to practice. I invite you to do this in as comfortable of a posture as you can find. So you can do it sitting, but you can also do it laying down. I actually invite you to do it laying down if that's available to you. You can also do it in movement. If you are going to do walking meditation or any sort of movement, I just invite you to slow down the pace to about 10 to 20% slower than your normal pace. And that's because if we move at our normal pace, the mind is more likely to fall into autopilot than if we change the pacing. So you can do it by also going faster than you would do it, but that kind of forces you to focus on the activity. But if we can slow it down a little more, we still also avoid falling into the range of autopiloting. Your eyes can be open or closed or anything in between, whatever you feel is most comfortable for you today. And if you don't know which one, experiment with all three. Eyes wide open, eyes kind of half closed with a little just hazy focus forward, or eyes closed. And that's because sometimes when we have our eyes open, that's when we feel the most stimuli coming in, our mind starts racing. But sometimes that happens when we close our eyes, and that can shift in the same person depending on what they're going through. So always when you're practicing, experiment with eyes open. If one doesn't is suiting you in this moment, even though it's been reliable all along, switch to the other and see what works best. I invite you to listen to my voice and the prompts that I'm going to provide. There will be periods of silence so that you can connect with the prompt, let the mind chew on it, and then see what it does with it. And all you have to do is notice what is happening as you work with it. And so, are you able to work with it? Are there thoughts arising? Are there physical sensations arising? Are there emotions arising? So at any given moment, being able to, take note. Is there something here? Okay. Allowing it as best as you can to be here, and then coming back into whatever the activity is in the prompt. I should say the silence is going to be enough so that your mind will likely wander, and that's okay, because the practice is the bringing it back portion. That's where we get the full effect and benefit from the practice, is that coming back. So I'll prompt, there'll be silence, the mind will work with whatever it's working with, and then I'll come in with another prompt or remind the same prompt, and you guys will see, where was I? Had in that brief period, in that minute or minute and a half, did my mind wander, or did it stick with it and Vivian's voice just kind of came back into the fold? Throughout, I want you to, as best as you can, to keep a friendly, gentle, and hopefully curious attitude toward whatever you're experiencing. Like I said, from a perspective of mindfulness, and hopefully you can hold that stance for just the period of practice as best as you can. There isn't anything wrong. There isn't a wrong idea or thought or emotion or physical sensation. Sometimes the mind will start going into stories as to its origins and where it came from or how to fix it. I invite you to, as best as you can, just stay with the sensation, stay with the emotion, or stay with whatever it is that you're experiencing, rather than get into the analyzing or the solutioning of it. And then If I invite you to stop if you need to, or if you just want to. You can also shift to a practice that feels more nourishing for you today. Now, I've picked this technique for today's practice, but it might not be resonating for you. Know that we're here to support one another in our practice. So, whatever you want to do, please feel free to do that. And we've got each other to support. So, with that, I invite you to get comfortable, and whatever that means in this moment, whether it means taking a stretch or taking some deep, intentional breaths, maybe even sighing out the exhale of those deep breaths. Until you really feel like you're ready to start, and then just letting the breath go to its natural rhythm. We'll start by speaking of intention and setting an intention for this period of practice. And so we can do it as a community. I'm going to offer up some words, but please modify them so that they become your own. May these few minutes that I dedicate to practice be easeful, peaceful, relaxing, effortless, spacious, soft, releasing of tensions. And for this time, I recognize I have nowhere to go, nothing else to do, just being here for now. That's just one idea of an intention. Reflect on what is your intention. We'll start by working with relaxation. You can scan the body to notice areas that are already restful. So you can start from the head down to the toes and just stop as you find an area that's rested, that's neutral. And soak in the sensations that are there. Remembering that rest is a relative state. And so, what are the qualities of rest in this area? How do I know that what I'm experiencing is actually rest? And once you've noted the rest in that particular area, you can continue in that place or move the attention somewhere else, scanning for another restful place and then settling the attention there. And if the mind wanders, you can draw the attention back to that restful place or move it into an area of tension or hardness, and begin to notice the contrast from rest. How do I know this is tension? What does tension feel like? It has its own qualities. And once you do that, if you are in an area of tension, see if you can offer it to soften. Maybe taking a deep breath in and exhaling the air through that particular area with the intention that it reaches that body part. And if the body part that is holding tension doesn't seem to soften, see if you can hold it with the same gentle intention that you called in at the beginning of the practice. May you soften. May you relax, rest, release. And if you want to experiment with creating intentional contrast, you can tense or squeeze, clench a part of your body, maybe making a fist in one hand, but letting the other one be restful, and toggling your attention between the tense and the soft. And then you can begin to release that area of intentional tension, slowly offering your awareness to it and noticing what sensations arise for it to soften. Maybe it even matches the other hand. And alternatively, if you're more visual, you can use an image, imagining this body as a stone that is thrown into a body of water, and it begins to sink deeper and deeper, weighty, heavy, held, supported, the deeper it goes. So let this time of practice be effortless. From this space of effortlessness, there are infinite possibilities. There are thoughts, there are emotions, there are physical sensations that all percolate to the surface. Allow that awareness to expand so that it creates a wide container in which all of these plans and memories, worries and joys and regrets and laments, that they can all be held. And remembering to breathe, knowing there's no need to expel or remove any of these things to connect with rest. Rest is already here. So experiment with whatever might be here, and you can use just the word welcome for each of them, whether they're pleasant or unpleasant. A sincere welcome. Sleepiness, welcome. Restlessness, welcome. Sadness, welcome. And if images work for you better, you can imagine your body on the surface of water, floating easily and gently, perfectly suspended. The sky above and the sea below. And as any ideas or notions, thoughts or memories or planning arise, you can imagine them evaporating up into the sky or getting soaked and dissolving into the water. All of these things keep moving above or below. nowhere to go, nothing to do. Even this breathing is effortless. The body is breathing itself. So let's give in to the body's wisdom, this moment's wisdom. The circadian clock that invites us to slow down, relax, and give in to the body's needs for rest and repose. And as we build trust in our experience, let's tune into our awareness, trust in our wisdom, recognize and embrace the tranquility. Tend to whatever feels accessible. Befriend whatever feels supportive or nourishing in this moment. So if it's an image, an emotion that's here, a physical sensation that's here, count on what needs to happen, what needs to be sorted out or handled will do so in its own time, in its own way. Just as this body breathes without us trying to get it to breathe, and these organs function without us having to tell them how to function. They just do it all on their own. The mind thinks and processes without direction or instruction. And if we were to take them all together, the invitation would be to just be. Just be. And if anything other than rest is arising in this moment, offer some kindness to it. You too, may I hold you with tenderness and kindness. May you soften. Letting these breaths allow you to deepen deeper, allowing you to get heavier in this body, to loosen and soften with each exhale. And when you do notice rest, just noting it as rest. Savoring its presence, knowing that it's fleeting, appreciating it in the now. Release, rest, reset. And now, as we round out this practice, I invite you to offer some gratitude to yourself, to recognize that you could have been doing a multitude of other things, but you carved out this time to support yourself in this way, to be in community. And knowing that although we actually benefit individually from the practice, that there are ripple effects of our behavior and the way we move out into the world that benefit others from this practice as well. Now, in the same way that we began, I invite you, when you're ready, to take a deep breath in and exhale out with a sigh. And doing that a couple of times, as many as you need, to bring your awareness back into the space that you're in. Opening your eyes if they were closed and scanning them, focusing them far and close and around, stretching, yawning, in whatever way that makes sense.